Hey, Stephen Young here at the at High Octane Classics in Auburn, Massachusetts. We're kind of doing the junkyard crawl, the muscle car crawl. We're not in a junkyard, but this is the engine room at High Octane Classics. And you know, there's all kinds of V8 engines on the planet. You know, kind of started with Cadillac around 1914 or so, but of course Henry Ford in 1932 made the flathead kind of the poor man's V8, power for the masses. And ever since, V8s have grown into all kinds of different shapes and forms. But there's many things about engines that make them different. This item right here, if you look at the valves or the rocker arms, they're canted. You would be forgiven for assuming this is a big block Chevy. You can see how the valves go in on angles like that. It's called a canted valve design. Stamped steel rockers on pedestals. Well, this is actually a Ford. This is a Ford 429, 460 type engine made from 68 through, gosh, 1979, 80, something like that, whatever it is, into the 80s actually in trucks. But this is very, very similar to what Chevrolet did with their 396 in 1965. And again, canted valves open the valve inward away from the cylinder wall, so there's less shrouding. But again, very simple stuff. These little guys right here are oil deflectors. The oiling push rods squirt up here. The oil then goes down where it lubricates the fulcrum on the pedestal. A simpler type of a valve train arrangement is found on the small block Mopar right here. This is the rocker shaft mounted on integrally cast pedestals right here on the cylinder head. Very simple. There's no need for a separate part here. The rocker shaft bolts right down. The stamped steel rocker arms actuate against the tips of the valves, which go straight up and down. There's no canted valve action going on here. Very simple. In fact, it's very much like the small block Chevy, which is what the small block Mopar, it's not modeled after, but the small block Mopar came along in 64, the Chevy small block in 55. And you know that Chrysler engineers took a long look at the Chevy small block when they designed the small block Mopar engine. So again, those simple straight down valves on a wedge chamber are great. The only downside is when the valve comes straight down, it's coming up against the side of the cylinder bore where it can be shrouded. The airflow sometimes can't flow between the bore and the valve head. So canted valves a little better for breathing. Now this is a small block Mopar, 273, 340, 360 from the factory, and there's bigger ones, 418s, that kind of stuff, strokers. When you get to the big block Mopar right here, we see the same basic architecture. Now this came first. 1959 is when the rocker shaft with the stamped steel rockers appeared on the 413 and the 350, 361, 383, 400, 426, all that kind of stuff. And again, these are very basic. The valves go straight up and down. There's no canted valve action here. In the world of Mopar, the most exotic head, as we know, is the 426 Hemi, which takes the canted valve concept all the way. Instead of having them go off at small angles, they go lateral, opposed, where they open toward the center of the bore and are absolutely unshrouded. But this is a 440 Mopar right here, and again, a great example of the very basic type of rocker shaft, stamped rocker arm architecture. And speaking of stamped rocker arms, these things right here, these were patented by Chevrolet in 1955. This is basically a piece of flat steel that is then formed and coined in many processes. And it's a way to make one piece of metal do many jobs at very, very, very low cost. So again, General Motors pioneered the stamped rocker arm with the small block Chevy. The Pontiac also had it in 1955. So again, so many different ways to go V8ing. What's your favorite? If you like this video, be sure to subscribe to the Steve Manianti YouTube channel, and by all means, check out the cars at High Octane Classics. They can be found at the High Octane Classics website.